At a time where Pokemon discourse has arguably been at its most divisive in years, it's easy to see the series as this never-ending cycle of negativity after spending any amount of time online. But about 1 year ago, every Pokemon fan was brought together by a piece so brilliant, so shining, by an exceptional group of people that we may never see all work together on a Pokemon project ever again. And this is the story behind Pokemon's greatest visual masterpiece. Pokemon's animation is something I've wanted to talk about on this channel at length for some time now, especially given that it's gotten so good ever since Sun and Moon. The TV series has consistently reintroduced more animation-friendly character designs that constantly allow for a wealth of expression, and web series such as Twilight Wings and Poketoon have really pushed the franchise in unique directions that I just adore. So given that this video is a little different from the type of game-centric content that I usually cover with Pokemon, I'd really appreciate your support when it comes to this one. Of course, today we're here to talk about the jaw-dropping video that has gotcha, but its story actually begins just a year before with Bump of Chicken's previous song, Shina Sekai. Even though it's just one big chocolate commercial set to some brilliant music, the staff list behind this video was so stacked, and would later have much of its DNA absorbed into gotcha's production. Directed by industry legend Rie Matsumoto, characters from Yuki Hayashi, and color designed by Yuki Akimoto, the 2019 music video absolutely feels like a predecessor to gotcha in a lot of ways. Matsumoto's talent shines through clear as day in both. You got lots of perspective with the camera zooming through eyes, characters on screens in the background reacting to what's happening in front of them, or some wonderfully bright and colourful cityscapes. The music video actually got a book detailing its behind the scenes work, storyboards, compositing and character designs, and if anyone out there is listening, please, I would love to see something like this for gotcha. Matsumoto's career has spanned many years, with series like Kekkai Sensen and Kyosogiga being fantastic showcases of her previous work. One more crucial component for the backbone behind gotcha's production is yet another aforementioned industry legend, Yuki Hayashi. Previously one of Toei's top talents and now a freelancer, he was in charge of all the new character designs as well as being the director of animation, on top of doing an overwhelming majority of key animation for the video itself. He's exceptionally talented at what he does, and having him work on Pokemon at all feels like such a landmark moment for this franchise. For years, Pokemon's animation was almost entirely handled by the team at OLM, and whilst they've produced some great work in that time, seeing some outside influence on Pokemon was just so refreshing. You're probably already familiar with his animation on action series like Dragon Ball, One Piece, or most consistently My Hero Academia, but his character acting is what he's really best known for. It's all over this video, and paired with his clingy design for Pikachu or this excitable blob of an Eevee, do we get some main characters to identify with on this 151-second adventure. Of course, all the recognizable faces from the series past have been presented wonderfully too. It's kinda crazy that throughout the whole thing, despite having so many characters to nail the personalities of in such a small window, gotcha never drops the ball. And much of that can be credited to Hayashi, with my absolute favourite being the cut of all the protagonists silhouetted across the building before the big chorus drop. It's only 2 seconds long, but all of these characters, most of which have never had any sort of in-game personality, are brimming with expressive movement that just tells me so much. It's especially emotional for me because on screen, I played as all of those characters when I was younger, and to see Hayashi of all people animate each and every one of them with so much love almost kinda brings me to tears. Like, I'm sure this tells you a lot about gotcha as a production, that it wasn't just the work of a single director, designer, or general overseer that made everything work, but mainly the wealth of exceptionally skilled animators that all played a crucial role in making this video one to remember. The first absolutely standout cut that I think is worth celebrating was the one with Green at the Indigo Plateau. Maybe it's because that fight is the penultimate one of the very first games in the series, and Odashi brought his team of 6 to life in such a fast-paced and impressive cut that I really wanted to highlight. Shortly after the video came out, she tweeted that upon seeing the storyboards and the cut that they were tasked with, that it felt like opening a treasure chest. And I couldn't agree more with how iconic this scene really is. Besides her later work on the Tsubomi Poketoon, which was of course excellent, Odashi's work on other series typically prioritize her strengths as an animator through fantastic character acting, so getting to see a literal explosion of effects work with such speed and finesse feels like a real treat. I'm sure as you've noticed, this entire video is littered with some incredible compositing work and is easily what elevates gotcha as a Pokemon production for me, with Masataka Ikigami being at the helm of the whole process. Whilst never outright bad, Pokemon has typically been very samey when it comes to how everything is composited. It feels rather plain looking in spite of having some great animation, which makes me so happy that gotcha decides to be just so distinct in that aspect. all made possible by the fact that studio bones weren't tied down to the same restrictions of a TV series. As you can probably guess, Ikigami's portfolio has been consistently astounding, having worked on series like Mob Psycho, Carol and Tuesday, and unsurprisingly, a music video that I'm sure I've already mentioned once or twice by now. On Gotcha, everything has this hazy, chromatic aberration effect where it then dips into a gorgeous, grainy looking sequence with such a retro feel, as all the champions seamlessly dance in and out of the order their regions came in. At some point soon after, all the Sword and Shield gym leaders are shown with this really limited but extremely vibrant color palette that yet again captures all of their personalities just perfectly. It's got this nutty background animation of a Rotom whizzing around a stadium at 1,000,000 miles a second, even showing Oleana and Chairman Rose in the cut with Bead that I hadn't even noticed until writing the script, despite seeing this video, no joke, 200 plus times. God, that whole section just leaves me with such a huge grin on my face every single time, with the tail end being animated by the wonderful Yurakiso. You've got Hop fading into the Leon fight with like the most threatening Charizard ever, and then as its attack collides with Cinderace's, you get not one, not two, but three gorgeous series of impact frames in between some absolutely stunning effects work. How the colors shift between blazing oranges to Dynamax pinky reds to deep blues in the span of a second. Some of their finest work, especially given the speed behind it all, and it's nice to see something outside of their usual amazing character acting. I think Sword and Shield's biggest strength was in its character design, and I feel so validated in knowing that regardless of the quality where the actual games are concerned, every one of them got the chance to shine in this video. Shu Sugita was the one that did much of the work on the aforementioned stadium cut and is yet another name that I never thought I would see on Pokemon. I think the cut that they did on One Piece a few months ago was another great showcase of their brilliant understanding of 3D space as an animator. Like Generation 8's big draw was its larger-than-life scale to gym battles in a big stadium, and Sugita's timing as he hangs on every major character in such an environment was handled exceptionally. I might be a little biased because I just love Mewtwo as a Pokemon, but this is the most threatening I've seen him look since that first movie, and I'm all for it. Yuki Sato is an incredible animator, and she's the one to thank for making my favorite Pokemon just look so alive. You can immediately tell that the Mewtwo cut was her because of those extremely inky smears and explosive effects work right out of her previous work on series like Haikyuu and Fire Force, and her involvement feels like such a big win for something like Pokemon. Mewtwo is particularly interesting because originally it was the Pokemon to be feared in much of the media that it was introduced in. So to take the Mewtwo from X and Y of all the games and turn that intimidation factor up to 11 is not something that should go unnoticed. See, in that regard, I think that scene best sums up my favorite thing about this whole video. Despite being such a love letter to the series, Gotcha feels so not Pokemon, and I just love that, both visually and in terms of what it chooses to animate. To use an example, it's not like it focuses on just Dynamax or just Mega Evolution. All three of the series' core bracelet battle gimmicks get a well-deserved nod, which is so wonderfully unusual for a series that is known to cycle out these ideas to a fault. I already talked about the compositing earlier, but besides that, the actual key animation itself just feels so modern. You've got the effect shapes, the really inky lines, just a wonderful attention to detail on the movement of every individual character. And there is a real understanding of what this series means to so many. And in saving the best for last, nothing sums it up more than the most iconic scene in the history of this whole franchise. 53-year-old Yutaka Nakamura is an animator that really should need no introduction. Even if you can't put a name to his work, you've definitely felt his impact across the series you've watched in some form or another. Whether it's his creation of the Utapon cubes, where a shocking amount of cube-shaped debris have been individually animated to convey the power behind some impact, or the sheer volume of homages to his work throughout the industry, I think it'd be an understatement to say that he's one of the greatest animators of his generation, and the 5-second cut that he did for Gotcha has literally every one of his traits used to such a brilliant effect. What I'm sure you'll have noticed is that at regular speed it still moves at 1,000,000 times a minute, being animated on ones, aka every single frame at 24 FPS. In recent years, Nakamura has continued to push his work to new heights, almost to the point where you might need some kind of animation literacy to understand what's going on in a lot of instances. So why not take a deep dive into what makes his work so great? His cut on Gotcha begins with Blastoise spinning in like a UFO, very reminiscent of his work on plenty of other series. Of course, it works perfectly with Blastoise's actual design, and the shapes used here are just sublime. It really sells how fast all of this is going. The background animation here is pretty insane, with the perspective shifting effortlessly into the wide shot of Red and his team of Pokemon. The effect that appears when Blastoise hits the ground continues to snowball into something bigger when they begin spraying water from its cannons. It's real nice to see the shapes here look so explosive when water type attacks in Pokemon are typically shown as a lot softer and more rounded. It's important to note that Tyranitar's attack only pops in with one frame, but it's drawn with such intense smears that it gives the illusion of movement in motion. Again, super impressive. As debris just continues to fly out from Blastoise's attack, you've got Tyranitar visibly bearing the brunt of that Hydro Cannon. It's not just standing still, waiting to be hit. Between the effect shapes and the character acting, everything feels so real, so visceral. Something that, again, we've never seen to this extent in Pokemon. It's all happening at the same time on top of some brilliant perspective and background animation, and I don't know if Nakamura ignored the storyboard for this one and went with his own thing like usual, but god, it all just looks so good. The whole point of this video is about trying to show why all of this stuff is such a big deal for Pokemon, but it's hard not to just gush over how powerful Nakamura's work really can be. What is something we don't see pretty much ever on Pokemon are really sharp-looking Pokeball effects. Am I weird? Do I just notice these things a lot? My absolute favorite being with the Arbok and Tsubomi, where the effect wildly distorts into the shape of the Pokemon itself. But here, the sharpness emphasizes the urgency that Tyranitar is in, like he has gotta get out of there. The smeary debris gets larger and larger as the camera swoops towards Gold, sending out his Ampharos with some real force. Two things to note here. One is that the Pokeball is cleverly layered behind Gold's arm, which wildly exaggerates the speed at which it's being thrown. And the other is how seamlessly the perspective shifts between the two cuts to make it look like it's all one big take. As the appropriately chosen Ampharos, both for a Johto trainer and somebody against a water type, bursts out of the Pokeball through Blastoise's attack, Nakamura opts to draw an impact frame within the effect of the Pokeball itself, having possibly the coolest looking Ampharos in, the entire series? All whilst the background is moving at 1,000,000 times a minute, the clouds blending in with the snow and water to make it look like one super wide-angled shot? All until Ampharos launches one hell of a Thunderbolt to close it out. The impact frames here exist to give the feeling of a perspective shift, as the next immediate frame is Ampharos looking much further away. All to really sell how lightning fast this attack really is. And the shapes used here are really something else. A combination of snow, wind, and water drawn as tiny little individual droplets really contrasts with the chunky lightning shapes within the outer colors of the bolts themselves, which are not only super different how that classic move has been depicted in Pokemon since the beginning, but so different to the papery looking attack that Blastoise launched earlier. And as it finally cuts back to Blastoise's reaction and his trainer peering through the darkness with some, again, incredible background animation, do we get this smeary drawing of red to perfectly cap off the scene. Yeah, I know Blastoise's jaw is miscolored, but it's happened plenty of times before, and this is barely noticeable. But I'd be lying if I said this scene wasn't so emblematic of what Pokemon is, how important this whole animation is to the series, and why, even if we don't ever get something like this again, how crucial it is that we remember it. I've never felt Pokemon capture a moment like this, or this, or this so well in any other form. And that's what Gotcha is. It's a love letter to Pokemon made by some of the greatest talents in the industry, and I really think that's something worth celebrating. Since I've had the opportunity to talk to some of you for this video and I know you're watching, I owe a huge thank you to the staff that made this project happen. And with Evolutions, Poketoon, and the main series still looking so strong, I can't wait to see what comes next for how this series looks in motion. This really is the most perfect thing to come out of Pokemon in a long, long time. Thanks for all the support in my recent videos. You can support me on Patreon to watch them much sooner, or even be involved in the editing process yourself.